Within this lesson, we are going to be building a basic website structure. So setting up the HTML page elements, nesting them within a main wrapper class, and within that wrapper class, applying the CSS grid to those elements, and then setting up the template rows, template columns, and then how we can control the starting and the ending of the columns so that we get this type of structure that's fully responsive. I've got the editor opened on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we've got a preview of the HTML file. So this is starting out with the basic HTML structure. We're setting the doc type to indicate that this is going to be an HTML5 document, opening up the HTML tags, closing HTML tags, and then nested within the HTML, the head, and the body. So let's go ahead and we're going to link to our CSS file. The CSS file is located on the same directory as the HTML file. So setting up the link tag and using the rel to indicate that this is going to be a style sheet, and then indicating style sheet within the rel, and then setting the href to the location of where the style sheet is located. So in this case, because it is within the same directory, we're linking to it just using the style.css, and that's going to open up the style sheet. So going into the style sheet, you can always try out and just make sure that you did link properly within the style sheet by setting a property to the body. And within the body, we can set a background color, and then you can set that to background color. And once you save that, it should update the body background color, and that way you know that you've connected the HTML with the CSS style sheet. So let's go ahead and we're going to build some HTML structure for the page in order to prepare for the grid layout. So we're going to need a main wrapper. I'm going to be using a div tag for that and setting a class for that and giving it a class name of wrapper. So this is going to be where all of our HTML code is going to sit within, and this will also give us an element that we can select in order to apply styling to it. And that element is going to be the element with the class of wrapper up within the HTML or within the CSS, setting up the wrapper, and then we'll apply some styling to that element. Within the wrapper, setting up the header tag. And we're going to use the header tag, and this is going to be the main heading area for the web page, and you can also type in header within there. The next, every web page does need to have a navigation, so we're going to use the nav tag in order to set up the navigation, and we're going to be adding our navigation code within there. Next, we've got our main article. So this is going to be where the main content of the website is going to go, so set the article. And the next is going to be the A side, which we can use in order to set the sidebar. And this can be moved using styling. We've got the article, so this is the main content. And there's also a footer for the website, so set up the footer tag. And I'm just going to type in the different content that's going to be expected within the page. I'll also make the web page larger, so we're zooming it into 200% so that we can see the content. So right now, because we haven't applied any styling, we've got a very basic structure here where we're going to be preparing in order to select those page elements and then adding in the styling accordingly to the elements. You can also add in classes specifically within these in order to be more specific for the classes, or you can also do it with the styling when we do make the selection of the elements. So making a selection of the elements, I'm going to set the parent element within the wrapper and set that up as the main grid. So using the display grid, we'll apply the grid properties to the children that are directly within the main grid element. Within the grid as well, you can set the number of columns that you want as well as rows, and we'll be setting that a little bit later. Let's select the elements that are contained within the wrapper, and if we want to select the header that's immediately within the wrapper, we can select that element this way. Let's set a background color to it so that we can see the header and the boundaries of the header element. So it's going to provide that header element. And this way, when we are using the symbol, the greater than symbol, if we do have another element that if we do use header again, it's not going to get that styling applied to it. So even if we do have another element that is a header, it's not going to be immediately underneath the child element for the element with the wrapper class. So that allows us to distinguish styling applied directly to that specific element. So even if it was sitting within the nav, it's not going to get the styling applied to it. Let's do the others as well, where we're going to apply the selection. So we've got the header, we've also got the nav, and set a different background color for the nav. So we can see the difference between all of the elements. We've got the article. And all these elements are going to behave the same way as divs would behave, as they are structural elements, and they can be used in order to provide structure for your web page as you're designing it. Let's also look at the side, do a darker color for this one. And then lastly, let's select the footer, and we'll apply some styling to the footer as well. We can also select all of the elements that are directly underneath the wrapper by using the asterisks. The asterisks, or the wildcard, will automatically select all the children that are directly descendants of the wrapper element class, so that we can see the spacing of the elements. Also add in the box sizing across all of the page elements and set it to border box, so that will update the elements to be 100% across, including the inner element sizes. Also within the wrapper, the children, set some padding there. So that's going to provide a little bit of padding, and I'll do a 1 EM padding for those child elements. So I've automatically applied some spacing. Within the sidebar, we can see that we don't see the font. So I'll set the color of those elements, and we'll set it to be white. So you can use the hex values or the named values. Either one will provide the coloring for the page elements. Go back up to the wrapper, and now let's apply some styling to the grid template rows. So what the grid template rows will do is this allows us to provide the height of all of the row elements. So it's the number of widths for each one of the rows within the grid layout. And the values are going to be separated with the space within the list. So that's going to allow us to select the different heights that we want to set for those page elements. So for the header, we want to set a 20%. And you can use the different measurement units in order to set these. For the navigation, let's set the navigation at 50 pixels. Then we'll set the main content area for 300 pixels. And then the footer can just be auto. So whatever is left within the styling, we'll set that to auto. So we want to also set that the main content and the sidebar are within the columns. So let's use the grid template columns, and what we want to set up here is that the header, the nav, then the footer are going to be full width, the main content and the sidebar are going to be split width. So we can set the heights and the widths using the different units. So if we want to have columns, so the first column would be 50 pixels, and then the rest of the column we could use the 1FR. So it's going to be the FR unit, which is going to represent the full row width. So that will create this type of effect where the first one is going to be 50 pixels, the second one is going to be 1FR. We can also use a 2FR, so that will be 2 of the FR units. So the 1 will be half of whatever the size of the 2 is, and this is a way that you can make it responsive. So when we're resizing, we're able to do the resize on those. If we set them all to 1FR, so that will create an evenly spaced set of columns, and that's going to be representing the columns that we're doing. We can also do this similarly where we can do a repeat, and using the keyword repeat will allow us to repeat the 1FR 3 times. So you can also structure it this way where we're setting it 3 times, and this needs to be comma separated in order to accomplish that. So this is the same as doing the 1FR 3 times, and we're able to do that. You can also do the repeat notion in between other values. So we can set a value of 50 pixels, and then the rest will be 1FR. So this is the same as doing 50, 1FR, 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 and then same thing for the 2 FRs. There's also a line positioning that we can do. So for instance, if we want to set the column widths, and this is going to be where we're going to be setting this for the main content and for the sidebar, and the rest of them are going to be fully across. So setting up the main content is going to be 1FR, and then what we want as the width of the sidebar, or if we want the main content to be 3 times the size of the sidebar, we can separate it this way. So that will create the main content and the sidebar column widths. And now we have to be specific with the elements and which columns we want to be assigning to each one of those. Column start, and here we want to start the column at the first available column. So set that property to be 1, and then end that using the grid column end value. And we want to end that at column number 3. So that will allow us to go full across. So if we set it to end at column 2, that's only going to set to the same properties. So it's going to be starting at 1, ending before 2. So that's only going to be counting for just the 1 column. And that's why even though we only have the 2 columns set within the template columns, we need to set it at 3, and that will allocate that value from 1 to 2 and count the header across the full width. We can also do that for the nav as well. So that'll be 1 and 3. We leave the main content and the sidebar as is, and then going down to the footer, we also allocate the column start and the column end to be 3. So that gives us a fully responsive design for a web page. And if we resize that, and we can shrink it down and we can resize it. So now what's happening here is that the grid template columns are being set only to the main content and to the sidebar. Gives us a structure for the page that we can then build out the page elements. Main wrapper, grid gap. So this is useful if you want to have some spacing between the elements. And I'm going to set it up as 1 EM as the gap between the elements. So that provides us some more spacing. And of course, this is once again fully responsive. And as you resize the web page, also resizes all of the elements. So now we've got a fully responsive website that we've got a basic design that we can use, and now we can apply some additional styling into the page elements and add in some content as we continue to develop and design our web page. So go ahead and try it out and build your own basic web page template. You can also change the columns by adding in and setting the different template columns. Depending on the number of columns that you're setting within the template columns, you can set the different start and end values within those. Coming up next, we're going to continue to develop out the website.